did you think of this commencement speech for the class of 2024? Congratulations to all the graduates. I do genuinely wish you all the best. Well, as of the time of this recording, it's graduation season, and there's a number of commencement ceremonies that have happened in the last week, or will be happening soon, or perhaps even happening today as of this recording. And it's interesting to see all of them come across, of course, because we do celebrate that we have a new generation of folks going off from college and hopefully on to do great things with their lives. You know, we all hope that as a group of faculty and researchers, and I'm sure many professors are having proud moments this weekend as students that they've mentored receive their diplomas, and the many good students that have done a lot of great work and are well and truly deserving of the diploma that they're getting, as opposed to some of the activist teachers and things like that that are not very deserving and the like. This was an interesting piece that I ran across in the Free Press related to that. And it might sound a bit harsh, but in this case, when we're talking about truthful things and what have you, and we're thinking about this, of course, being some of these folks are the next generation of scientists that are crossing the stage and getting their diplomas, perhaps in hard science degrees, perhaps in social science degrees, perhaps in humanities, any number of different things. And it's more so a question now of where are they going from here? And, you know, asking the question, have we really done the best that we can do as higher education, you know, professors, to train them, to give them the tools of how to think, not what to think, in this particular case. So I stumbled over this. To the class of 2024, you are all diseased. The commencement speech you need to hear from the Free Press. This is May 13th dated. Professor Robert Parham writing for this. So I figured we'll have some fun going through this because I have read it already. It is an excellent thing, and there's a lot of good points in here related to this, although there's some other things that I think I'll get into also. If you're graduating from college this year, I suspect you are not too familiar with George Carlin. So before you become inflamed about the intentionally harsh title, let me tell you that I plagiarized it from Carlin, who was one of the best comedians of the last 100 years. His show, You Are All Diseased, is available on YouTube, and it is so good that I was willing to start by alienating you a bit just to plug it here. You're welcome. It is especially recommended if you're in any kind of altered state of mind. Now, George Carlin was an amazing comedian. Absolutely amazing comedian. He was known for his very biting style, very, very harsh on certain things. And actually, I have it over here. I'll play a little bit of it. My personal favorite from George Carlin is his infamous rant on soft language and political correctness of many, many years ago from the 1990 stand-up special he did, Doing It Again. So just a little bit just to give you a taste for those of you who may be unfamiliar with George Carlin.
I don't like words that hide the truth. I don't like words that conceal reality. I don't like euphemisms or euphemistic language. And American English is loaded with euphemisms because Americans have a lot of trouble dealing with reality. Americans have trouble facing the truth. So they invent a kind of a soft language to protect themselves from it. And it gets worse with every generation. For some reason, it just keeps getting worse. I'll give you an example of that. There's a condition in combat. Most people know about it. It's when a fighting person's nervous system has been stressed to its absolute peak and maximum, can't take any more input. The nervous system has either snapped or is about to snap. In the First World War, that condition was called shell shock. Simple, honest, direct language. 2 syllables, shell shock. Almost sounds like the guns themselves. That was 70 years ago.
As of
then
1990,
a whole generation
by the way.
went by, and the Second World War came along, and the very same combat condition was called
about 100
battle
years ago now.
fatigue. 4 syllables now. Takes a little longer to say. Doesn't seem to hurt as much. Fatigue is a nicer word than shock. Shell shock. Battle fatigue. Then we had the war in Korea, 1950. Madison Avenue was riding high by that time, and the very same combat condition was called operational exhaustion.
So that's just to make the point, George, about who George Carlin is. I highly recommend this if you want to give yourself a good laugh. And as with a lot of comedians, you know, when they're biting like this, they hit on something that is true in here. So you can look it up on YouTube, George Carlin's rant on soft language. But anyway, speaking of states of mind, I'm worried about yours. Rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide among people your age in the U.S. are skyrocketing. This is a true statement also. He's pointing actually to some literature in here that is of note. I myself lost a student to suicide a few years ago. That sucks. An experience I wish I'd known one. I'm here to tell you that it's partly your professor's fault. We, along with others, have been feeding you a distorted view of the world and your place in it, and I think this has caused a considerable part of the existential angst you all feel. But I'm not just aiming to point fingers. I want to lay a vision of the present and future, which I genuinely believe and yet know many of you do not share. After all, exposing you to unfashionable ideas is a core part of a healthy education. My deeper hope in doing so is to start a conversation on changing this sad state of affairs and to get you on your way to a happy, healthy life. Isn't that what commencements are all about? Whenever I speak to my students, I teach at the University of Virginia, they seem deeply pessimistic about the state of the world. We all know the reasons. Climate change is going to kill us all, late-stage capitalism is running amok, inequality is at an all-time high, racism and bigotry are rampant, gender nonconforming and queer people are under unprecedented attack, economic anxiety has never been worse, AI is coming for our jobs, and on and on and on. I then pose a simple thought experiment to them. If you were given a time machine that could take you back to any period in the last 12,000 years since the dawn of civilization, when would you rather live? You see, I believe we currently live in the golden age of humanity. Things have never been better for human beings, yet it seems we have never felt worse about our prospects. If you're a woman, go back more than 100 years and you become property of your father and later your husband, with no voting rights and little protection under the law. If you're a person with above average melanin levels like me and the same and worse happens to you. Gender nonconforming minorities would find their past just as terrible. Based on every objective measure of well-being, safety, health, and wealth, if you are a college student in America today, you are better off and wealthier than the King of England was 300 years ago. You have better access to education, entertainment, leisure, and healthcare. You have cleaner water and more abundant food. You have a significantly safer and longer life. And you have access to all of the world's knowledge, including this piece, in the palm of your hand. Just think about that difference. This is where, you know, there's all the talk of looking at history and looking at the past, and you do want to look at it. You learn a lot from it. But you also learn how blessed you are in today's world with everything that we have. And just to make the point of that, in part because of the amazing achievements of science in pursuing the truth, obviously with some ethical guardrails since particularly the 1960s, but you think about all the scientific and technological achievements because of that approach to looking at reality as a reality-based community, trying to figure out how the world works, answering questions, figuring out what the truth is about different things, in part just to find the truth for the truth's sake, but also to solve problems and make life better. And it is also through so many different things that have happened that, you know, we have the recognition that we do, that he's talked about here. And it's not just you. Throughout recorded history, the vast majority of humans lived in what we would today define as abject, dehumanizing poverty. Income and wealth inequality were measurably worse than they are today by orders of magnitude. Women died during childbirth at staggering rates. Most humans didn't survive childhood, and various forms of subjugation and slavery were the norm in nearly all societies. On these and a variety of other objective measures, humanity has made breathtaking progress in the last 300 years. Which then raises the question, why? Why is it that everything is amazing and nobody is happy? This is the fun part. Let's go back to comparing you to the King of England. If you're anything like my students, I've tried that line with them too, you felt that something was off with that statement. How can it be that you're better off than the King of England? You certainly don't feel better off, do you? We economists call this phenomenon relative wealth concerns, or keeping up with the Joneses. These are fancy terms to describe a simple psychological fact. We are constantly busy comparing ourselves to our peer group, and we feel bad when we fall short in that comparison. There's an old saying, comparison is the thief of joy. There's a reason to avoid doing that too much. Peer group is an essential term in the previous sentence. No one cares that they are enormously better off than their grandparents. They just care that they're worse off than Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. You don't feel wealthy, despite the fact that the median human lives on the equivalent of $5,000 per year. Yes, you read that right. Imagine if you lived in the US but only spent $5,000 a year at current US prices, and you've imagined the life of the median human today. Your peer group isn't humanity. It's social media influencers and billionaires, and you are deeply unsatisfied when comparing your lives to theirs. There's a reason you shouldn't make that kind of comparison. You live in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, yet you feel economic anxiety. The late Charlie Munger summarized it succinctly. The world is not driven by greed, it's driven by envy. And in this era of instantaneous communication networks and social media, envy has been put into hyperdrive. But envy has also been transformed and rebranded. Once a deadly sin, it became a virtue. We call it fairness, or sometimes equity, now, and concentrate our attention on all the ways the world is unfair. Mostly the ways that lead to others in our peer group having more than us. The world is unfair, deeply so. It's just that you're the lucky ones. You won the birth lottery. In a truly fair world, any dollar you make or spend above $5,000 per year would instead be given to someone else, maybe a poor Kenyan, a Bangladeshi, or Indian, but that's not the kind of fairness and equity anyone talking about fairness and equity around you seeks. Now, before I continue, there's one point I want to make on this that is an interesting thing. The STEM disciplines, science, technology, engineering, math, have driven so much of these things. I talk about it with respect to AI, but you have to think about it at large now, that, there's a lot of these things that are amazing things. Like social media is an amazing thing. The tech world is an amazing thing. Obviously, I wouldn't be talking to y'all right now if it weren't for the kind of discoveries and innovation that led to the creation of things like YouTube and Rumble, and Twitter, which I can never call X, but anyway, and all those kinds of things. But at the same time, now we reveal new other things that have made it easy to see other people and become envious of them. And that's something that all of us occasionally suffer from, but I do think it's driven envy on hyperdrive, as it were. You've been lied to. You've been told by the media, social networks, and not the least your professors, that this fantastic world we live in is evil. Not only that, you've been told it's your fault. It's not enough to be non-racist, they say. You must be anti-racist. Anything less than that, and you're complicit in evil. Some of you are better by default due to some accidents of birth. Some of you are worse. Small wonder you feel suffocated, anxious, and depressed. Any human weighed down with this responsibility and guilt would be just as down. The cognitive dissonance of being told colonialism is evil, American slavery is uniquely evil, that wealth in the markets that enable it are evil, while going to a top-tier U.S. institution built on Monacan land using slave labor would incapacitate anyone. The people pushing these ideas may have meant well. I'm doubtful of some of that, but, that's neither here nor there right now, because a lot of what he just described in that preceding paragraph comes from the critical theories, it comes from postmodernist thinking, and the like. So, and not in the least have we ever seen it. And a good example of this, if you go back to very early on in this channel, and it's continued since then with more literature appearing at the same time, is the notion of whether or not DEI trainings, which make use of a lot of postmodernist thought, are effective. They're not. They have a lot of negatives to them, but actually don't succeed at the very things they claim to. So that is very well known there in the literature at this point. The people pushing these ideas may have meant well. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt, but we see more than enough to know that the outcomes of this worldview are terrible, and yet many of your professors keep reinforcing these harmful lies. I know that from 7 years of teaching juniors at UVA about markets, my first class of the semester is titled, What is Money? A deceptively simple question, but simple questions are the most interesting. We discuss the emergence of the barley-backed money in ancient Sumer, the idea that money is memory of past services rendered, the inherent positive sum aspect of exchange in free markets, in which by definition both sides to a transaction become better off as a result. Why would they both agree to it otherwise? And the mind-bending idea that when they look around them in the classroom, everything they see, except naked humans, was made by a corporation. To a first approximation, corporations produce all the things and humans consume all the things. And we're always very rude to them. That might seem ungrateful. That seems mighty ungrateful of us. We also discuss wealth, or the accumulation of money. As a refugee, my family's balance sheet zeroed out in my early life. The money I have today was willingly given to me in exchange for my services, which luckily appear to be in fairly high demand. I taught my students. They gave me proof commemorating my service to them. I then, of my free will, asked Tesla for the services of a car and pass on some of that proof of service to them to commemorate their service to me. So did many others with their own hard-earned proof of service. We're better off, Tesla is better off, its employees and suppliers are better off, and so are their employees and suppliers. When my students ask, why do Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk have so much money, I answer, because we gave it to them, willingly. They created highly coveted services and managed to secure a teensy fraction of the value they created for other humans. Basics of how a free market work. Right there. You're freely to transact however you would please. And obviously what happens in that kind of case is like you get a really good product, so you're better off. And they get some profit out of it to be able to reinvest in the business, to be continuing to give more products to make more people better off. And to make their employees better off. And all that jazz. That's how that works. Without fail, at the end of the class, a few students tell me that the content of the course was diametrically opposed to what they had been taught so far. Prior, they had class discussions about the exploitative nature of the market system and its inherent unfairness, the evil and greed of corporations, and the fight of exploited workers against oppressive capitalists. That is activism that's being taught. That's not correct. I point out to them that these paradigms imply a zero-sum world in which wealth can only be created by taking it from others, whereas they live in the positive-sum world of markets in which wealth is created by exchange. Markets have deposited a magic wand into their hands, which allows them to freeze moments in time, observe what is currently happening in foreign lands, and conjure loved ones face-to-face for a face-to-face conversation out of thin air, i.e. FaceTime. Kings would have given half their kingdom for such a wand, but now anyone can have it for the low, low price of $69.99 per month, or about 5 hours of student work. This is how we got wealthy. They were told that the wealth of men like Musk and Bezos, and incidentally theirs, is ill-gotten, despite the fact that it was willingly given to them by other humans. That was how somehow taken from its rightful owners, the oppressed, whoever they might at that moment be. And that this oppressor-oppressed mindset applies more widely to other realms of human interaction. Because of accidents of birth, pigmentation, and privilege, they are oppressing others. Hence, they, the oppressors, must yield the floor to the oppressed, as they have already caused enough harm. That's postmodernist thinking, sometimes also it's privileged and marginalized dialect you might find in there. But that is postmodern thinking, and it is very harmful to just do that sort of false dichotomy with folks. It's no wonder folks are depressed and downtrodden sometimes, yeah. My students arrive at my class steeped in zero-sum ideas, in which one person's gain must be another person's loss, which is not necessarily true. Just because somebody gains doesn't mean another person loses. And the only way to get a thing is by oppressing it from someone else. Then they are shocked to hear heretical ideas about a world in which wealth is created, not stolen, and human interactions can be win-win and make all of us, immensely well off. The dissonance is severe, and they're unsure how to deal with the shame and guilt, with all the shame and guilt accumulated by years of accused oppression. I hence want to close by telling you, the class of 2024, it's not your fault. You are not evil. Being white, black, privileged, downtrodden, well-educated, illiterate, wealthy, poor, healthy, sick, cisgendered, non-conforming does not make you bad, or good for that matter. The sins of your forefathers are not your own. You did nothing wrong by being born. Yes, aiming to improve the state of human affairs is noble, but choosing instead to study, play games, and make out with a cute person you've had your eye on does not make you bad. It makes you normal. It makes you a normal, healthy human being. And no one seems to bother to tell you that. So there, I said it. You are not subject to the original sin. Go forth and have a happy, healthy life. There is still much room for progress, but things are currently better than they have ever been, and improving fast. Or as Carlin put it in his direct way, life gets really simple once you cut out all the bullshit they teach you in school. And this is where I come back to all the different surveys highlighted many times over. Students being uncomfortable on campus, faculty being uncomfortable speaking their minds on campus. Why? And it's because you can't talk about certain ideas and things, but it's also because of what's been taught so many times over. Teaching these ideas pretty consistently to folks is a great way to teach what to think, to teach that narrative über alles kind of thing. And, this one last thing in here, particularly about, being X things and, that doesn't make you good or bad, that goes right to what is the normative principle, one of the normative principles of science, the Mertonian norm of universalism. Being that as a scientist, it doesn't damn well matter at all what your background is. It doesn't damn well matter, and I'm sick of seeing the positionality statements, by the way. It doesn't damn well matter at all what that background thing about you is. It matters what your ideas are. It matters what you're arguing in your paper. And it matters whether, if you're just applying the scientific method, what kind of results you're getting. That's it. As far as scientists goes. Does that mean, of course, does that mean I'm saying there's not nasty things? No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that in the slightest. But the ideal here is what matters in terms of who you are as a person, not the demographic characteristics when it comes to your work as a scientist. And that is the thing that matters here with the Mertonian norm of universalism. You undermine that when you start making it matter what kind of demographic characteristics a person has. And that's the bullshit they teach. Not just in higher education. There's some quarters of higher education at least. But in K through 12 schools, you don't need to hear it from me here. You can go over to the Reason We Learn for that, because that's more of Deb's focus than mine. But that is the point to make in all of this. And I appreciate this line here at the ending that, you tell this to students a lot. There's a lot of things that you don't need here being put on you by your school, by your peers, by your professors, and all those kinds of things. But the search for the truth doesn't depend upon your demographic characteristics and background. It never has. It depends upon your ideas, your argumentation, your evidence, and if you're going to be a scientist, your ability to work with the scientific method. That's it. That's really all that matters in here. And there would be a lot of good students who could benefit from hearing this. He finishes up with why he did this. Oh, and one last thing. You might wonder why I am saying such heretical things in public. It's because I'm committed to it as part of my diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging goals, or DEIB goals, for the year. All UVA professors, all professors at UVA have a yearly review covering goals in all important fields of teaching and research excellence, as well as the recently added DEIB goals. The specific DEIB question on my annual review was, outline your priorities and plans for the coming year, including your specific goals to help foster diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging within the school and within your classroom. Here's what I had to say about it. 1, why is this category still here? 2, I'm one of the most diverse faculty members here, a refugee, veteran, immigrant, person with above average melanin, and proud owner of the only mezuzah at McIntyre. And I aspire to include all of my students and give them a feeling they belong. Yet possibly the thing most diverse about me is my opinion in the next point. Diversity is great, inclusion is amazing, We should all feel like we belong here, but the only interpretation of equity I've had rigorously defined is a stock equity in a company. The main meaning of the word I could find seems to be adjacent to equality of outcomes, which I hold is being anti-liberal and deeply misguided. My DEIB goal for 2024 is to help abolish DEIB establishment at UVA. I think I've really done well on my DEIB goal for the year with this piece. They'll probably give me a raise after that, don't you think? At the very least, no one will accuse me of telling you only what you want to hear, and maybe a few of you will actually heed my advice. If that's the case, it was all worth it. Okay. So it's a fantastic piece. I highly recommend it. And this is, lots of great comments here. So from the Free Press, I highly recommend this piece. But his point is very well taken. Demographic characteristics don't matter half as much when you're dealing with science in here in particular. And doesn't technically matter a whole lot for a lot of things. Unless you are being taught to say that it does. And that's not necessarily helpful for anybody at this point. Doesn't mean there's not things to figure out. But I don't necessarily care as scientists go what the background does and what the demographic characteristics are. In fact, when I see positionality statements, I don't read them anymore because they don't matter. And I tend to shall we say, not give a very favorable review for that because it's unnecessary. It's unnecessary and undermines a whole lot of things. And why are you wasting your word limits on that? Anyway, let me know what you think of this commencement speech for the class of 2024. Congratulations to all the graduates. I do genuinely wish you all the best for your future careers. And I hope some things like this are helpful because, you are graduating into a world that is slightly gone mad. Or at least slightly gone mad, but if you get off of social media, you're going to find it's actually pretty nice. So I hope you go enjoy yourselves after you've listened to this video. But congratulations, class of 2024. Wherever you're headed next, I hope it's great things for you. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button on the way out the door, comment on the video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, all that lovely good jazz. Until next time, I'm Adrian. May you stay curious.